Put 2 fingers flat on the side of your neck and find your pulse. Feel how steady that is. That strong, even beat tells you almost nothing about whether a heart attack is coming. Here is why. Most heart attacks do not come from the hard, narrowed arteries everyone worries about. They come from soft plaque that a standard cholesterol panel cannot see at all. You can pass every routine test every year and still be carrying the exact kind of buildup most likely to kill you. And I am going to tell you exactly what your yearly blood work misses, all 4 of them, before this video is over. Let me clear a few things out of the way first, because I know what you are already thinking. This is not about people who secretly ate badly. It is not about smokers who quit too late. It is not about folks who skipped their checkups. I'm talking about the walkers, the swimmers, the people who read labels in the grocery store, and have a folder of good lab results at home. And there is one number in particular, a number most people have never had measured even once in their entire lives, that explains more of these cases than anything else. Stay with me all the way to the end for it. I am Dr. James Weatherly. What I do on this channel is simple. I take the things your body is trying to tell you, and I explain them in plain, honest language, the way a doctor would if the appointment were an hour long instead of 11 minutes. No fear, no selling, no nonsense. If that is the kind of health information you have been looking for, take 1 second and subscribe. There are a lot of people over 60 being told that everything is fine when nobody has actually looked at the right things. And every single person who subscribes helps this reach the next one of them. That is the whole reason I do this. Now let me reframe this problem for you, because I think the way most people picture a heart attack is the reason they miss it. When you imagine a blocked artery, you probably picture a pipe under your kitchen sink. Years of grease going down the drain, the opening getting smaller and smaller, until one day nothing gets through, and the whole thing backs up. That is the picture almost everyone carries. It is also the reason so many careful, healthy people get blindsided. Because a heart attack is usually not a pipe finally closing. A heart attack is usually something bursting. Think about a road instead. Underneath the asphalt, water gets in, freezes, expands, and pushes up. From the surface, the road looks fine. You drive over it every day and notice nothing. Then one cold morning, a truck goes over that spot, and the whole thing caves in at once. The damage was not on the surface where anyone could see it. It was in the layer underneath, building quietly, waiting for the right moment to give way. That is what happens in a coronary artery. The dangerous buildup is not sitting in the open channel where blood flows. It is inside the artery wall itself, tucked under a thin cap of tissue, soft and greasy and inflamed. The channel can still look wide open. Blood flows through fine. You can run on it, you can pass a stress test on it, and then one day, that thin cap tears, the soft contents spill into the bloodstream, your body treats it exactly like a cut, and forms a clot to seal it, and that clot closes the artery in seconds. Not over years, in seconds. Here is the part that reframes everything. Research going back decades, looking at people after heart attacks, has found again and again that most of these events start in arteries that were only mildly narrowed. Not the 90% blockages, the modest ones, the ones a doctor might describe as mild plaque, nothing to worry about right now. Cardiologists have understood this for years. It just almost never makes it into a regular checkup conversation, which brings me to why nobody told you this. I want to be fair here, because your doctor is not hiding anything from you. The standard cholesterol panel was designed decades ago as a population screening tool, and at that job it does reasonably well. It is cheap, it is fast, and across millions of people, it catches a lot of risk. The trouble is that it was never built to answer the question you actually care about, which is whether you personally are carrying unstable plaque right now. Add to that the reality of a modern appointment. 12 minutes, 3 refills, a blood pressure cuff, and a screen full of boxes to check. Nobody in that room has time to zoom out and look at the whole picture of one particular human being. Numbers get read as pass or fail. Yours said pass. The conversation ends there. Not because anyone was careless, but because the system is built for speed, and this problem requires curiosity. Let me tell you about Gordon. Gordon was 64 when I first heard his story, a retired high school track coach from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 31 years of standing in the cold with a stopwatch. The kind of man who still ran 4 mornings a week because his body simply expected it. 5'10", 168 pounds, the same weight he was at 40. He drank 1 beer on Saturdays. He had not smoked since 1979. His wife Marlene used to joke that he was the only person she knew who actually finished the vegetables on his plate. His labs were the kind you would frame. Total cholesterol 185. Good cholesterol high, because runners often have that. Bad cholesterol right around 100, which every guideline calls acceptable. Blood pressure 118/74. Blood sugar normal. Every single year, the nurse would call with the results and say the same word. Great. Everything looks great, Gordon. On a Tuesday morning in March, about a mile and a half into his usual loop, he felt what he described later as pressure. Not pain, he was very specific about that. Pressure, like someone had set a heavy book on the center of his chest. He slowed to a walk. It did not go away. His jaw started to ache, which confused him because he had no idea that was even a heart thing. He sat down on somebody's front steps, and a woman leaving for work found him there and called for help. He had a complete blockage of the left anterior descending artery. He survived because that woman happened to open her door at the right minute. Here is what the cardiologist told him afterward, and this is the sentence that sent me down the road to making this video. The artery that closed had been about 30% narrowed. 30. If Gordon had walked into a cardiology office the week before and had that artery imaged, he would have been told it was mild. Nothing urgent. Keep doing what you are doing. If you have ever been told your numbers look great while something in you quietly wondered whether anyone had really looked, type the word healthy in the comments. I want to know how many of you are out there because I suspect it is a lot more than anyone realizes. Now let me answer the first question you should be asking. If Gordon's cholesterol was 100, how did he build plaque at all? This is where the standard panel starts to fall apart, and it comes down to a difference most people have never had explained to them. When your lab reports bad cholesterol, what it is actually estimating is the amount of cholesterol cargo being carried in your blood. It measures the freight. It does not count the trucks. Picture a highway. You are told how many tons of cargo passed through today. 60 tons. That sounds moderate, and you relax. But 60 tons could mean 600 heavily loaded trucks, or it could mean 1,500 half-empty ones. Those are wildly different highways. The damage to the road depends on how many trucks went over it, not on how much each one was carrying. Your arteries work the same way. The particles that carry cholesterol have to physically bump into the artery wall and slip through the lining to start plaque. It is the number of particles knocking on the door that determines how many get in. Some people, and this runs strongly in families, carry their cholesterol in a large number of small, underfilled particles. The total cargo looks fine. The traffic is enormous. Two people can have identical bad cholesterol numbers and completely different risk, and the routine panel cannot tell them apart. There is a blood test that counts the trucks. It is called apolipoprotein B, usually shortened to apoB. Every one of those artery-damaging particles carries exactly one apoB protein on its surface, one per particle, no exceptions. Measuring apoB is a direct head count. It costs very little, it does not require anything special, and most people over 60 have never had it drawn. Gordon's apoB measured after his heart attack was high, not borderline. Genuinely high, in a range associated with real risk. His cholesterol had been telling him about the cargo for 20 years while the traffic went unmeasured. Let that sit for a second, because there is a second piece to Gordon's story, and it explains something the apoB alone does not. It explains the timing. Why that Tuesday? Why not the Tuesday before, or the one 3 years earlier? Plaque had been building in Gordon's arteries for probably 30 years. Slowly, quietly, without a single symptom. But plaque sitting there does not cause a heart attack. Plenty of people in their 80s are walking around with plaque and will die of something else entirely. What turns quiet plaque into a lethal event is the cap tearing. And caps do not tear at random. Come back to that road under the asphalt for a moment. What actually causes the collapse is not the water underneath. It is the freeze and thaw. The repeated stress that weakens the surface until it can no longer hold. In your arteries, that stress is inflammation. Inflammation is your immune system's repair crew. It is not the enemy. When you cut your hand, inflammation is the reason it heals. But when your immune system stays mildly switched on for years at a time, in the background, at a low simmer, that repair crew starts working in places it should not. Inside the plaque, immune cells arrive to clean up the mess and end up releasing enzymes that chew away at the fibrous cap, holding everything in. The cap gets thinner and thinner, until the ordinary pressure of a heartbeat is enough to tear it. This is measurable. The test is called high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, and it picks up the low-grade background inflammation a regular inflammation test would skip right over. Large studies, including work led by researchers at Harvard-affiliated hospitals, have shown that people with normal cholesterol but elevated levels of this marker carry meaningfully higher cardiac risk, and that treating the inflammation itself lowers events. That research changed cardiology. It has not changed the average annual physical. What raises it quietly in people who look healthy? Poor sleep. Untreated sleep apnea, which is enormously common in men over 60 and enormously underdiagnosed. Gum disease, which sounds absurd until you understand that your mouth drains into your bloodstream. Chronic stress. Visceral fat around the organs, which can exist in a thin person. And in Gordon's case, something nobody thought to mention. He had been snoring badly for about 6 years. Marlene had moved to the guest room. They both thought it was funny. It was not funny. He was waking dozens of times a night without knowing it, and every one of those episodes sent a small surge of stress hormones and inflammation through his system. Before I get to the last piece, do me a small favor and drop your star sign in the comments. Virgo, Capricorn, Leo, whatever you are. I ask because I am curious whether the people who watch these videos all the way through have anything in common, and it is a fun thing to scroll through. Mine is Taurus, which I am told means stubborn, and my wife says that tracks. Now, halfway through, let me remind you of what I promised at the start. 4 things your yearly blood work misses. You have 2 of them. The particle count, apoB, the inflammation, high-sensitivity C-reactive protein. The third is a picture rather than a blood test, and I will get to it. But the 4th is the one I have been holding back, and it is the reason I made this video at all. It is a single number, fixed in you since the day you were born, that your doctor has almost certainly never ordered, and it explains a striking number of heart attacks in healthy people. Before that, the picture. Blood tests tell you about risk. They do not tell you what is actually in your arteries right now. For that, you need to look. And there is a scan that does exactly this, called a coronary artery calcium score. It takes about 10 minutes, you keep your clothes on, there is no needle, no dye, and the radiation dose is small. In many places, it costs less than a nice dinner out. What it measures is calcium in the walls of your coronary arteries. Here is the useful part, and here is the honest limitation, because I would rather you understand this properly than walk away with half of it. Calcium in an artery wall is scar tissue. It is what your body lays down over old plaque to stabilize it, the same way a wall gets patched. That means calcium is not itself the dangerous material. The soft, greasy, unstable plaque is the dangerous material. But calcium is an excellent marker of how much total plaque a person has accumulated over a lifetime. Because where there is scar, there was damage. A score of 0 in someone in their 60s is one of the most reassuring findings in all of preventive cardiology. A high score tells you that atherosclerosis is well established in your body, whatever your cholesterol says. The honest caveat, a 0 score is not a permanent pass, especially in someone with a strong family history, or the marker I am about to tell you about, because very early soft plaque has not had time to scar yet. This is why the score is one piece of evidence and not a verdict, and why the newer scans that image soft plaque directly are becoming more common. Anyone who tells you a single test settles your risk forever is oversimplifying. Gordon never had a calcium score, nobody suggested it, and he had no reason to ask for something he had never heard of. His score, calculated afterward, was well over 400. That is not a subtle finding. That is a number that would have started an entirely different conversation 5 years earlier, when there was time to do something. Which brings me to the last piece, the one I have been saving. There is a particle in your blood called lipoprotein a. Written down, it looks like the letters L and P with a small a beside it, and it is spoken as lipoprotein a. It is essentially a normal cholesterol-carrying particle with an extra sticky protein wrapped around it, and that one modification changes everything about how it behaves. It slips into artery walls more readily. It carries inflammatory cargo. And it interferes with your body's ability to break down clots, which means when a plaque does tear, the clot that forms is more likely to be the one that finishes the job. Now here is why this is the number that matters most for people who look healthy. Your level of lipoprotein, a, is set almost entirely by your genes, not by your diet, not by your running, not by your weight. It is decided at conception, and it stays roughly the same your entire adult life. You cannot exercise it down. You cannot eat it down. A person can do every single thing right for 40 years and carry a high level the whole time without a clue, and it is not rare. Current estimates suggest roughly 1 in 5 people worldwide carries an elevated level. 1 in 5. Think about your family, your street, the people in your church, or your bowling league. Yet the vast majority of people have never had it tested a single time, because it is not part of the standard panel, and it never has been. Major cardiology and lipid organizations now recommend measuring it once in a lifetime for adults, precisely because one test answers the question forever. Once you know, you know. If that landed the way I think it did, type the word hidden in the comments right now. And if you want me to keep pulling things like this out into the open, subscribe, because this is exactly the sort of thing that never gets said in a 12-minute appointment. Gordon's level was very high. So was his brother's once he got tested. So was his daughter's, which is the part that still gets to me, because she found out at 41 and now has 30 years to do something about it. Here's how Gordon's story actually resolved, and I want to give you the whole picture, because it is not a tragedy. He spent 4 days in the hospital and came home with a stent and a shopping bag of medication he had never expected to take. The first month was rough. He was frightened to walk to the mailbox. Marlene told me he sat in his chair listening to his own heartbeat, waiting for it to do something wrong. That fear is normal, and it is worth naming, because a lot of people go through it alone. What changed things was information. His cardiologist ran the full advanced panel, the whole set, and for the first time in his life, Gordon could see what had actually been happening inside him. The high particle count, the inflammation, the genetic marker he was born with. Suddenly the thing that had felt random and unfair had a mechanism. He was not unlucky. He had been carrying a specific, identifiable, measurable risk that nobody had looked for. They treated the particle count aggressively with medication, because when the underlying driver is genetic, lifestyle alone will not carry the load, and pretending otherwise costs people their lives. He got a sleep study and started using a machine at night, and within 2 months, his inflammation marker had dropped substantially. He saw a dentist about his gums, which he found faintly ridiculous until it was explained to him. He kept running, a little slower on his doctor's clearance. Gordon is 68 now. He walked his daughter's oldest to the first day of kindergarten last fall. He tells people the heart attack was the worst thing that ever happened to him, and also the reason his brother and his daughter are going to be fine. That is the whole point of this video, actually. Not fear. Information early enough to matter. Let me give you 5 specific things you can do starting this week. First, ask your doctor to add apolipoprotein B to your next blood draw. Just say the words apoB. It counts the particles instead of estimating the cargo, and it gives you a truer picture of how much traffic is hitting your artery walls. It is inexpensive, and it goes on the same draw you were having anyway. Second, ask for lipoprotein a one time. Not annually, once, ever. Because it is genetic and stable, a single measurement tells you something permanent about yourself. And if it comes back high, that is not a sentence. It is a reason to be more aggressive about every other risk factor you can actually control, and a reason to tell your siblings and your children to get tested too. Third, ask whether a coronary calcium score makes sense for you. This is a conversation, not a demand, because it depends on your age and your overall picture. But if you are over 55 and have never had any imaging of your heart, it is a fair question to raise. The reason it works is that it stops the guessing. It tells you whether the process has actually started in your body, rather than estimating from averages. Fourth, take your sleep seriously as a heart issue, because it is one. If you snore heavily, if you wake up unrefreshed, if your partner has ever mentioned that you stop breathing, ask about a sleep study. Untreated sleep apnea keeps your inflammation simmering year after year, and inflammation is what thins the cap over the plaque. Fixing your nights is one of the most underrated cardiac interventions there is. Fifth, and this one costs nothing, write down the deaths and cardiac events in your family. Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, ages, if you know them. Bring that piece of paper to your next appointment. Family history in a first degree relative before 55 for men or 65 for women changes how a doctor weighs everything else. And most people have never actually assembled it in one place. I need to say the obvious thing here, and I will keep it human. This video is education, not a diagnosis. I do not know your history, your medications, or your labs, and you should take every one of these questions to your own doctor or pharmacist rather than acting on them alone. Never start, stop, or change a prescription based on something you heard on the internet, including from me. And please hear this part clearly. If you ever have chest pressure, tightness, or heaviness lasting more than a few minutes, or pain spreading to your jaw, neck, back, or either arm, or sudden shortness of breath, cold sweat, nausea, or lightheadedness, call emergency services immediately. Do not drive yourself. Do not wait to see if it passes. Do not apologize for taking up anyone's time. Gordon's pressure lasted 4 minutes before he sat down, and the only reason he is alive is that someone else made the call for him. Where are you watching from today? Drop your town in the comments. I genuinely like seeing how far these travel. Here is what I want you to take away. Being healthy is not the same as being safe, and that is not a cruel joke. It is an invitation. The people who get blindsided are almost never the ones who did something wrong. They are the ones who were measured with the wrong ruler. You have the ability to ask for a better ruler. That is real power, and most people never realize they have it. Now think of one person. The brother-in-law who runs marathons and mentions that his father died young. The friend who says his cholesterol has always been perfect. The husband who snores so badly the dog leaves the room. That person is never going to search for this on their own, because as far as he knows, there is nothing to search for. You might be the only way this ever reaches him. Send it to that one person today. And if you want me to keep explaining the things nobody takes the time to explain, subscribe and stay with me. Because there is a great deal more your body is trying to tell you, and most of it is being missed. Next week, I want to talk about a blood pressure reading almost everyone gets wrong. Not the top number and not the bottom one. The gap between them, and what it quietly says about the stiffness of your arteries after 60. I'm Dr. James Weatherly. Take good care of yourself this week.